Well, hello everybody. Good morning and good evening for those in Europe or Asia who are tuning in. Welcome and thank you for joining. So today we're going to cover in this panel some topics about learning, teaching those learnings and educating others to, in the end, maybe convincing them to adopt a new technology. Before we start, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Eva Bojorges. I am the Community Relations Manager at Docker. And today I have a great group of panelists. We have all of the three of them are Docker captains. And in some way or another, they are all teachers. So let me start with Julie Lerman. She's a software coach. Julie, why don't you say a few words about yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody, and thanks, Eva, for including me on this panel, or even having this panel. It's a great topic. I've been in software for over 30 years as a developer, and these days I act more as I work as a software coach to software teams around the world, and I also teach by way of Pluralsight videos and conference talks and writing and just trying to share my learning experience and hopefully make that learning experience easier for others.
Thank you, Julie. We also have Francesco here. He's head of DevRel at Daily Dev. Francesco, do you want to say some words?
Hey, welcome. Thank you for inviting me. Finally, I'm a guest and not a host. It's a bit strange for me. I'm Francesco, a software engineer, computer scientist. I've been too much time on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch lately, and I like to share my experience. I also interview people, for example, for Michael and other people from the tech world. And I'm super happy to be in this panel because both of my parents are teachers. I have some teaching DNA somewhere, so it's a long story, but yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Francesco. And last but not least, we have Michael Irwin. He's from Virginia Tech. And Michael, take it away.
Yeah, so I'm Michael Irwin, as Eva just said, I'm at Virginia Tech, and I wear a couple different hats here at the university. I primarily work in the central IT organization and currently working on leading an effort to create a common platform to help make DevOps easier for people to get into. But I also do teach here at the university. I've been teaching many years now. Started doing like intro to Java stuff many years ago, and then I've slowly been kind of transitioning into cloud and container space. And actually this semester I'm teaching a class on Kubernetes, which is pretty awesome too. So I love being in front of people and teaching, but also learning from them as well too. So happy to be here on this panel, and looking forward to the pretty lively discussion I'm sure we'll have here too. So.
For sure, for sure. So let's start with something easy. So in order to teach, first you have to learn the new thing, a new technology. I'm sure all of us have learned, especially in the container space, that is quite large. So when learning a new technology, how do you get started with that? Maybe Michael, you want to say something?
Sure. And as you said too, containers is a large space, and it's a very large ecosystem, and we can spend the rest of the time just talking about just this one question. I feel, and honestly, for me, I think I started my container journey 6 years ago, so I've been in this space for a long time, and getting into the space has changed over that long time. And so like a long time ago, it would be very much it's the Uber nerds and the CLI, doing everything. And now it's transitioned to, it's a little bit more mainstream. And so you've got a lot more higher level tools and everything. So for me anyways, and I know everybody learns in a different way. For me, I'm the type of person that wants to kind of understand under the hood how it works and the kind of the nuts and bolts and that kind of stuff. And I'm very much that way because I love just kind of architecture and design and how things are pieced together. And so for me, the way I like to learn is kind of, I've got a problem, I'm going to solve it. But as I'm solving it, for example, I'm going to deploy an application with containers. Cool. All right. So how do I create my first container image? How do I deploy it? But also, how's it working? I know kind of what's under the hood. So that's the way I like to think, and I like to approach problems. But I know everybody's different, so I'll yield the floor to Francesco or Julie and see how they approach it.
Oh,
You
I could be
go.
polite. It's hard. I'm like, oh, I have so much to say. So
Yeah.
I guess I'll just jump in. So I think oftentimes people are learning either from need, as you were just saying, or from curiosity. And I think it's really helpful to keep in mind this. I actually did this kind of cartoonish cartoon panel, Julie's 7 Steps of Learning that I've used in a talk, which is, kind of like first hearing about something and you're curious about it, but you might not dig into it quite yet. Then you start digging in and learning, and then immediately it gets confusing and frustrating, right? Like,
Yes.
we've all gone through this. And then, so after we have our tantrum, um, just, keep at it. But then there is finally this moment. It's like a moment of joy when it clicks, right? And I think it's really important to always remember that, for those of us who are experienced, remind yourself that, I mean, we always know it's like a carrot on a stick in a way. We know that's coming, but to help others have an awareness of that too. Like, yeah, you're probably going to get frustrated, but I promise you, and don't worry about that, right? But when it clicks, it's all worth it.
Francesco.
I don't know if I can add something to what Michael and Julia both said, and I really feel that both of them are really great teachers already because they're really the right mindset to transmit something to someone else. By the way, I'm a great fan of them even before, so for me it's a great honor to be in this panel. Yes, about how to get started, we can go into more technical ways because I got this question about 10 times per day. So how can I get started with containers? So sometimes you can start with a video. It's plenty of information now. So usually I suggest some courses, Brad Fisher's course, other free courses on YouTube. But it's more about your mindset and your wish to learn, because now there are maybe too many information, and you have to choose something. And what I really suggest is to start doing something instead of watching like 10 hours of tutorials. We are not on Netflix. You're just want to get your hands dirty, maybe get your application, and then you get started. And by the way, I just want to warn you that DevOps, it's really a rabbit hole. If you jump into that, you can really disappear. So it depends on your grade of interest. If you want to dig that, if you want to become an expert, for sure you can, or you can just scratch the surface, and that will not be your job, and that's totally fine. So, but I suggest that everybody can just have a look, at least at the basics of containerization.
So go ahead.
I
Go
just
ahead,
want to
Michael.
jump into, and one of the things I really like what Julie was saying too about those aha moments, and it's kind of the aha where things just kind of click and it's like it makes sense. And I know, I teaching and maybe transition a little bit more on the teaching side of things, but when teaching and kind of presenting new material and that kind of stuff, it's really easy to go to here's why you need to have it without helping people go through that journey so they have those aha moments along the way. And it's having those aha moments is what makes it all worth it and makes them want to kind of stick to it and use the technology, because that's when it finally clicks of like, now I see why this matters and everything too. So trying to think of how to, one, help ourselves have those aha moments, but also how do we help position others so that they can have those aha moments as well too. And that's a skill, and that's something that
Oh,
doesn't just
yeah.
come naturally at times, and it takes effort and takes planning and design for curriculums or presentations or that kind of stuff. So I'm glad you brought up that point, because it's such a good point there.
And, we might just get stuck on this. So just, turn off my mic, Eva, if you need to. But a big part of what Michael was just talking about also is reading the room, whether it's
Yeah.
one person or many people, right? Like, you got to pay attention to how people are reacting because maybe you've gone too fast, you've lost people. And I try so hard to be careful to make sure I'm not losing anybody, because I know what it feels like when somebody just keeps going and you're stuck and you just can't absorb anymore because you're still trying to figure out that other thing.
Yeah.
So and I've never taught like in the kind of classroom environment that Michael does. So I don't have that particular experience, but in smaller groups with my clients or whatever, I definitely, and it's a skill. It is. And sometimes it's just a natural instinct.
Yeah.
How do you get better at, you just said, what if you're giving a talk or you're presenting a new technology, and what do you do whenever you look at the room and there are no questions or there are no comments? You just look at them and their faces are saying like, I don't know, like I understood the first 5 sentences that you said and then you lost me. How do you, first of all, how do you avoid that? And if it happens, what would you do as coaches or as teachers
I've
in that
had this
scenario?
experience at a conference. I was doing a talk on it was at a .NET conference, and it was on containers. It was on Docker. Oh, right. And I was really, the talk, the title and the description were about, it wasn't an introduction to Docker containers. It was using it in your ASP.NET Core apps or something like that. But shortly into the talk, I saw the glaze, the whole, like most of the room. And I stopped and I said, who here has any experience with Docker? Like hardly anybody, who even understands what Docker is? Like hardly anybody. And I'm like, well, why are you in this talk? So I just shifted gears, totally shifted gears, and pulled up like, let me get a different deck, right? And then, so I did some intro, I thought relevant, and shortened it, and then kind of quickly went back to what I was originally going to show them, and just did it at a really high level to say, and this is how it fits in, but you can learn more deeply later. So I literally have had that experience in a conference talk. It was not hundreds of people. There was probably, 40, 50 people in the room.
Yeah.
I don't have experience as in real life as a speaker. Maybe it's as conference, so I hope to fix this next year. But what I can say is that Julie is on point. That I think it's very important to get a feedback, especially at the beginning. So maybe you go super slow at the beginning. It's like when you run, you need to go super slow at the beginning, and maybe ask even something which is really basic, like, okay, can you see the slide? Is this too big? So it's very, very important in the beginning, because if people they don't understand something in the middle, at the end, they'll make questions because they have been following you. If you lose them since the beginning, say, okay, so this talk is just it's not for me, so you lose them. So it's very important to don't lose them. So it's better maybe to go super slow. Even some expert can get bored, but at least you end with the most people that you can. So if that happens, probably you did something wrong, or maybe you were in the wrong room. Maybe you were in the wrong room. It could be.
Yeah, and it's hard too, because a lot of times you go to a conference and you don't know the audience you're presenting to. You don't know if they're going to be, leadership or practitioners that are, actually doing the work, or in between, or managers. A lot of times you have no idea who's going to be on the receiving end. So it does make preparing a little complicated at times. But and I'll echo what's already been said too. Kind of just thinking of different ways to present the problem, and kind of recognizing in many ways, and I tell this to a lot of people that are kind of preparing to speak. I think one of the most important tools as a speaker, or one of the most important skills to learn, is just be vulnerable and just let yourself, adjust and change, and kind of say, hey, is this making sense or not? And if you get a question that somebody, asking you don't know, it's okay to say, I don't know, but I'm going to go look it up and let's talk about it later.
Yes.
And a lot of times, and I fully recognize this as well, because I've kind of been on the speaking circuit a little bit and that kind of stuff too. In many ways, I feel like sometimes I'm put on a pedestal. People like, oh my goodness, it's Michael Irwin. I'm like, I'm just another dude that's just out here talking about it. And you know what? In many ways, that's actually why I started talking about it and why I started local meetups and that kind of stuff, because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was talking about. And so I went out and just started talking about it, kind of anticipating, okay, what sorts of questions, what sort of angles might I get? And so to prepare for those angles, let me make sure I know what I'm talking about in case I get those questions and whatnot. And so in many ways, as I have gone out and taught, it's helped me better understand the things that I'm teaching. And that's one of the main reasons I do it. So yeah.
I love that answer. I think many of you people who are watching us right now would like to someday be here and probably think, okay, I need to wait until I become an expert to come at a conference and apply to it and start talking about Docker or whatever technology they might want to teach. Do you have to become an expert before being a speaker? What level of expertise do you need to have to
So
start talking about
I'm
that
going to
topic?
defer this question to Francesco because he's like the best and prime example of this. So Francesco, tell your
Because
story.
since I'm not an expert at all, so I am the
Whatever.
perfect person. Michael, I was about to say that you are one of my favorite speakers, but we will cut this part. Okay. So yes, I think that it's not about how much you know, but how much you are good at sharing something. And I so and see this because, for example, I've connected with many content creators. You can be if you are super good at sharing something, you can share something that you have just watched the video, because you have this idea, this mindset of content creator, that you watch something and say, okay, so this is interesting, and you create something else, and you create this kind of funnel in where you learn something and then you expose the same things. And this process of teaching, of course helps you to understand, to have a better understanding. You can be a super expert about a topic, but you can be a very bad teacher, because you know exactly, you are a super great playing piano, but you can't explain to someone else how you do this. Or if I also usually use the example of Francesco Totti, which was a famous football player. He was a super good, one of the best players in the world, but he didn't have that skill. Sorry, Francesco. He didn't have the skill to teach to someone else. He says like, okay, I just put my feet under the ball and I do that. So in that case, this means that if you have the skill as a teacher, you really need to be in the shoes of the other person. You don't, as I said, Michael is really on point. You don't be on the pedestal, because of course you will make a lot of errors during the demo. I'll give this for granted. And yes, so it's more about helping other people to understand the concept. You are there to help them. You're not here to brag about yourself. You're just there to help other people to understand maybe what was difficult for you. Usually when you had the more difficult you had during the process of
Bingo.
learning. Yes, I want something. And of learning, the more you had problems, and more you will try to be in the position that can help someone else. So this is what really makes a really great teacher. By the way, I love this panel. Yeah.
Julie or Michael, do you want to add to that?
You do dare just put the timer on me on this one. My first conference talk was a result of being in another conference talk it was back in the early days of web services, and I was curious of this topic, and the speaker presumed that everybody in the room understood some basic security stuff, and the whole talk was based on that. So I was, lost, right? So I said, they put the talks out on DVDs. This is how long ago it was, right? Not the internet. And this section of the talk that confused me, I think I watched it. It's 5 minutes. I watched it 20 times before I was like, Oh, okay. And guess what the first talk I wrote was about? That 5 minutes. How I got from, like, not knowing to understanding the end of those 5 minutes, so that people who then learned that bit from me would be able to understand that other topic. So that, yeah, and I've done so many talks. I mean, my talks I've done related to Docker. I like I say, I know how to spell Kubernetes, K8S, and that's about all I know. I'm not an expert. I'm not a DevOps expert, but I really struggled with that first, like trying to wrap my head around Docker. I talked about this on a panel at a previous DockerCon. I've done talks on this, getting to AHA with Docker. Like, that's a talk that I do. So I've, you know, I took my experience. It just helped people get to that place where they at least go, oh, okay, now I get what Docker is for and why it would be interesting. And now I'm ready to go, learn from Michael, learn from Francesco, learn the deeper, more details. I've done that. I've done JavaScript talks. I can't write JavaScript for my life, but it was hey, I'm a .NET developer, C#, and, I kind of need to have an understanding of JavaScript. What is that like? Right. And it's, I make sure people understand. Don't start asking me JavaScript questions. I'm just I can only get you from here to here. But I do that all the time.
Yeah. I'll just add to, one of the things that, Julie was just saying was, hey, I found something that I was confused on and I shared it. And, probably now in today's world, there's probably, 20 different talks about, any particular topic. But what's interesting and what's, beneficial about this is everybody, like we talked about earlier, everybody thinks and learns in different ways. And so, just because there's 20 talks about topic X doesn't mean there can't be a 21st. And honestly, even myself, over the years, the way I introduced Docker and how I get people started with containers has evolved over time. And the way that I teach people about getting started with containers is totally different now than it was 5 years ago when I first started. And so, the industry is constantly changing. The topics are constantly changing. Everybody's evolving and everything too. So there's always room. There's always space for people to share, and I think the important part is just don't be afraid to do it and, get out there and, like what I said, let yourself be vulnerable. And I like what I think it was Francesco that just said a minute. At the end of the day, people are coming to your talk to learn something, not to criticize your speaking. So as long as you can kind of work through it, and even if actually a lot of the best feedback I've gotten from some talks have been, hey, I'm glad that you messed up that demo because I got to see how you debugged it.
Yep.
And that's hugely valuable. And so don't be afraid of making mistakes or not knowing everything perfectly, or a demo messes up. Sure, you're still going to be flushed and like, oh my goodness, I hope this works. I hope I figure it out. But that's part of the learning process, and people are there. And generally, people are there to support you. I think for the most part, we're not in a toxic trolling world, at least at conferences and that kind of stuff. People aren't going to pay to go to a conference just to troll you. And if they do, that's on them. So, just remember that people want you to succeed, and don't be afraid to share what you're learning.
And make them laugh. I have gotten away with major.
And in the case I can, but if you can't, good.
When I'm presenting, right? Like major, and my humility, right? But not like, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about. People do want to know that what you're sharing with them, you do know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
But I've gotten through those by just like making, some kind of joke or something, because they know, I do at least, I at least do have some street cred. So I can lean on that, right? I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I just like hit the wrong key or something.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, I love that overall theme about being vulnerable when you are teaching something, and I think that's really important, as well as also some people might be afraid to start learning Docker because it's also hard to be vulnerable as a student, right? Even if you're beginning and you're learning, it feels really bad to be the worst person in the room for some people. And how do you think people can overcome this if, you know, they are starting to learn Docker and then in their first tutorial they see 10, 20 terms that they don't understand? How do you think these people should manage this?
Well, I wanted, I was going like this, but it was before you asked your specific question. So I just wanted to back up a little bit. As a user group leader, this was, you know, what we called them before Meetup was around. I would, you know, reading the room, I would ask the stupid questions, even if it was something I already knew, like, you know, I didn't care. But I would stop and ask the questions that I think people might be having. So that's different than how you in the room. I think if you're in a learning scenario where you have been slammed with 20 new terms, and you're confused, you are not the only one in the room who's confused, and that is on whoever is doing the instructing. Yeah, and that's like anytime I have a problem, I'm like, okay, if I'm having this problem, 10,000 other people have had this problem. Right? So yeah,
Yeah.
you're probably you are not nobody's ever the dumbest person in the room, and there isn't such a thing, right? This is not about being stupid or feeling stupid or any of that. This is new information, and I don't happen to have the context by which to absorb it and click it into other things that I know.
Yeah. I'll add to that. The first thought that kind of came to my mind as you were presenting the question was, you know, it all depends on the learner as well. There are some people that are there to learn because they're interested, they're curious, they have a need to solve, et cetera. And then there are others that are more forced or more or less being kind of forced to learn because their organization is making changes, or they, you know, they just want to keep up with the industry and everything. And one of the difficult things about containers in general is that in many ways we're, without getting, you know, too much into the technical and everything too, in many ways we're seeing a rising of the abstraction level of computing that's happening here. So, you know, back, you know, we went from bare metal to VMs, and now we can carve up the VMs and everything. But now we're getting to the point where with containers, the abstraction level is rising. And so, like, for example, in our platform environments, I'm never touching a machine again because I've got a container and I'm just simply declaring my state and saying, this is what I want to have happen. And it kind of figures out where it's scheduled. And so it's a completely different mindset of how do I run my applications. Now, of course, this is, you know, the end goal dream of containers. Not everybody's all the way there. You know, a lot of people are still, you know, hey, before I deployed my applications by SSHing onto a machine, and I would run a command to deploy my application. And now I've swapped that with a Docker run, and that's perfectly fine. That's a good first step and everything. And for a lot of people, that's perfectly fine to even you know, end off there. But again, you know, what makes this hard is that there's such a spectrum of adoption of containers, and I think often we hear of the buzzwordy and all the new tools and the new technologies and new capabilities and all that kind of stuff. And it's very much on the other end of the declarative systems and the orchestration and all that kind of stuff. But yet on the other, exactly, it's scary. And because there's a lot to learn there. And well, I'll say that's where you get, you know, the most value out of it. It doesn't mean that there's no value at the other end of the spectrum where, hey, I just containerize this thing and now I'm logging into my machine and I'm doing a Docker run or a Docker Compose op or something like that to launch my application. There's still huge value that comes out of that by having your application containerized and deploying it from there. So, you know, it's hard to kind of get in and learn this because it is such a huge spectrum. You're kind of stepping into this whole new ecosystem. And for a lot of people that have had their old ways of doing things, it's a lot of change. And even though, you know, in the IT industry where, you know, change is the only constant thing, it's also one of the hardest things. And especially organizational change and cultural change and process change and everything, it's hard. And so learning that is hard because, again, you may have those aha moments, but now how do I fit this into my organization? How do I fit this into my processes? How do I fit this into my way of thinking of things? And that's hard. So I know that probably brought up a lot more questions than answers there, but that's one of the hard parts of kind of getting into this ecosystem. It's such a spectrum. So
Yeah. Can I add something super fast?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
That's what we're here for. Go.
Yeah. Just let me say this because as a developers, usually we feel overwhelmed. As soon as we start to learn something, a new world really opens. This can be applied to front end, back end, whatever. Even sometimes inside the front end or back end itself, and the same is DevOps. But what I can really say is that you don't have to learn everything. You can specialize in something. It's like, usually I make this analogy with medicine. Maybe this is a bad analogy, but you don't have to learn everything about all the aspects of medicine. You can specialize on something, and that will be your main job. Of course, a doctor knows a lot of stuff, but they know something very good. This can be applied to some DevOps, but even just some small parts of DevOps. You can be a Kubernetes master. You can be just a Docker master, and that's it. That would be awesome. So this is important because sometimes we feel lost. There is a famous schema about CNCF, which has all the technologies, and that's scary. If you look at that, that's scary. Maybe it's funny or it's scary. So start very small with something, and if you like that, you dive deep into that. This is I think the best thing that you can do if you feel overwhelmed when you are just getting started, and you start also sharing knowledge if you can. If you have an account, or you can share this wherever you want, with an article, video, or whatever.
I think everybody's taking a breath, like it's really reassuring to have 3 Docker captains saying that orchestration and Kubernetes and all of that is hard. So
because it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or hard to spell.
Well, you spelled it.
I mean,
K-A-T-S.
honestly, I say that I say that jokingly because I don't do that, right? I've used Docker as a developer to make it easier to create my development environments, right? My first use of Docker was because I had a MacBook, and all of a sudden SQL Server was on Linux and in containers, and that was and I was like, oh my gosh, I can actually use SQL Server on my Mac when I'm developing in, like I'm in Visual Studio Code doing my C# code, and I'm used to connecting to SQL Server or SQL Server Local DB or whatever. And like, oh, I can do that. And that was literally finally after a couple of years of going, oh, Docker is for like, IT pros before we said DevOps gurus, and like people who are way smarter than me. Okay, they're not. It's not a level of smartness. That's their expertise, right? I am not doing deployments and production servers and all of that. I'm programming, right? And so, yeah, I was like, oh, here's a use for it, and that was what literally got me started in finally playing with Docker. But I've never done. I mean, orchestration, or I don't need to. I don't need to. I have an understanding of what it's about, and I understand that I need to rely on other people to take care of it.
Yeah. And usually, when you got that use case, you stop installing stuff on your machine. Usually, at that point, you stop doing that.
So for the people in the audience that are probably wondering, what's a good first step? And, a lot of the people watching are developers who are well-versed with code already, and maybe they stop at the moment where they write the code, have it working in their local environments. What is a great first step for those people that they won't find too intimidating?
Yeah, can I go? First of all, you should go on Twitter and follow me. That's a very first good step.
Nice plug. There you go.
Wow.
And no, I'm joking, but yeah, maybe you should really look for help, because I've noticed this in the last years, that developers sometimes they don't want to look for help. Sometimes they want to learn something. This is a very good skill, but maybe we can balance this by asking questions. So if you are stuck with something, you should go to your DevOps friend. You should have DevOps friends among your friends, and then you ask them, how can I do this? How can I get started? Which are the resources which are useful? Can you help me for the first step? And then once you are ready, you can go alone and maybe start helping someone else. So look for help, ask questions.
And that's good advice when you're stuck on something too. I have a really, really hard time asking for help. I really do. And I will waste hours
Me
or
too.
days on something. And then there's two results to this. One is I finally just give up and I ask, usually it's publicly on a email list or on Twitter or something, and then somebody knows the answer like that. And I'm like, oh my God, I just wasted all this time. Or the effort, not effort, but the effort you make trying to express your problem sometimes reveals the answer. So usually, here's how it happens for me, which is I'll finally just give up and ask the question. As soon as I post the question, it's public, and thousands of people know that, like, oh my God, Julie doesn't know how to do that. Then I'm like, oh wait, I just have, oh, I got it. But, always like, oh, I'm just going to try one more thing, maybe it'll be this, maybe it'll be that. I waste so much time, and I'm self-employed. So that time's costing me, me walks with my dog or, or whatever that's costing me. So yeah, it is sometimes hard to ask questions because we have, we're thinking about our egos and our reputation and all of that. But what I love when this happens on Twitter, when somebody says, I've been programming for 20 years and I just did like this particularly ridiculously dumb thing. Like, in other words, we all make the mistake. And then all these people, there's a waterfall of people with lots of experience saying, yep, I've done this and I've done that and I've done that, to try to help people who are newer understand this isn't about, like we're genius or that it comes easily to us. Believe me, if I had to pay for Googling tech questions, like I would be like net zero on my income to my payouts to Google.
And there's that's the exact reason like Stack Overflow exists, because people ask questions and it's not always the beginners that are asking those questions. And there's a reason that the April Fool's joke for Stack Overflow was a copy paste button, because people go out and look for help, kind of thing. And so, yeah, don't be afraid to go out and ask for help. So, yeah.
Yeah, I hope, Julie, that you are not one of those people like said, okay, never mind, I figured out my problem. I hope that you ask the.
And this is right. This is what I figured out.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just like, what did you find?
Right. That I'm stupid. And we all say that, right? But then when you hear somebody else say that, aren't you like, no, don't say that. But then we say, we say it anyway. We say, oh, why did you have this problem? Because I'm a dope, like so that it's maybe, there's like, fun humility thing going on there, but maybe that's, maybe there's a problem there, right? Because we're teaching people that it's okay to call themselves stupid.
So my boss and I, we have something that we call the idiot counter. And so every time that we I'm just working on something and like the code's not working or test is failing or whatever, and it's because of something stupid, I just go idiot plus. And that's just, I increment my idiot counter. And it's just kind of a running joke that we have in the office. It's just like, yeah, we still make mistakes. We're still human, we're not perfect. And yeah, we mess up and it's okay. And you can make a joke out of it and pick up, move on, carry on. So what? So
Michael, I wonder if the idiot plus count is correlated to the most productive engineers, right? Like I think for somebody to make a lot of mistakes, they have to be writing a lot of code and they have to be doing a lot of new things
Well-
that they don't know how to do.
Well, and actually, there's a reason why I've kind of got this poster back here too, and I kind of keep it over my shoulder so I see it and remind myself quite often that, you know,
we're all going.
yeah, it says experiment, fail, learn, repeat, and it's not, I know for a while in the industry there was, fail fast, fail often kind of stuff, but nobody wakes up and says like, how am I going to fail today? Nobody really thinks that, but it's more of a, and what I love about software engineering and everything is that it makes these kind of scientific process easy to do without having to, we don't have to go and get hard materials and chemicals and all these different things to experiment and fail. It's code, it's bytes. It's, for the most part, it's fairly easy to adjust and change. I know some applications that's not the case, but whatever. And so the idea to say, hey, I have an idea. I'm going to try something out. I'm going to experiment. Here's my hypothesis. And I'm going to, spend a minute to think about what's the measure of success or failure. And based on that, did I learn, hey, that's a good thing? Or, okay, I learned that that's not the right path. And now I know something else. And so it's just kind of that feedback loop for yourself is how do you just keep that feedback loop going without beating yourself up in the process? Because that's how life is. I've got 5 kids here at home, and learning to walk, you don't learn to walk on your first try. And it's just a lot of just experimenting, fail, learn, repeat. And you just kind of keep going through that. And that's what we're all doing. And some of us have to learn the same thing 30 times, and that's okay.
And as long as you're not deploying that experimental code, you're not bringing down your country's economy or
Wow, that got really drastic.
Well, yeah, I mean, I used to.
Yeah, you can.
I'll never do consulting for banks or airlines or governments because I was so afraid, like, if I made, I make a mistake in those areas, I don't know.
But then again, then that's opportunities to learn how do we better secure the process so that we can catch things earlier in that life cycle, so that we don't deploy failed code. So yes, it may still cause a big issue, but hopefully anyways, I've kind of seen the shift over the years that it's now, postmortems aren't necessarily who we're going to fire, but what processes or what things do we need to adjust so that in the future we don't run into the same problems. And I love that shift. And I think in many ways we need to all have that same mentality as well.
Yeah, and I think just let me add that it should, jokes aside, the project should not just rely on just one person. So if one person can bring one whole system of bank system down, the problem is with the system, not with the new developer, of course. Yeah. So you need the backup systems and someone who can, check what the other people are doing. So it's not the fault.
Yeah, I forget the outage. It wasn't that long ago, but it was
a recent one, and they threw the intern under the bus.
Yeah. It was an intern that did something. I can't remember which outage it was, but it was like, that's an opportunity.
Me neither. Like, was it Facebook? I can't even remember. They threw the intern under the bus.
No, Uber,
or maybe not. Maybe they, it was an imaginary scapegoat, but it wasn't Docker, was it? That would be embarrassing.
No.
If we're talking about that.
I don't know. I have to go look that up now.
Just kidding.
I can't remember. I've also replied.
Isn't that amazing that we can't even remember?
But that was amazing because they switched this to something funny because they said like it was the intern of course. So they posted something like that. So they switched to something funny. Yes, I can't remember.
Anyway, let's not get stuck on. We're trying to remember who that was. But I think that's interesting that none of us remember who it was. I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. So amazing. As we are approaching the end of this panel, I would like to have one tip and not follow Francesco's Twitter because we all went and followed him already. On what to do as a beginner to go into the container space, into Docker. What do you think the people finishing this panel should go and do right away that they can easily do?
Were you saying into production? Just state that question again, please.
Yes, for sure. So for the people watching us, what is one tip that they could do right now to get into containers, to get into, or doesn't have to be containers, but yeah, putting their application into production. Mike?
Yeah, so I would say, and of course the answer is going to vary depending on who you are and what your experience level is and everything. I would say pick one thing you don't know right now and just dive into it, and don't be afraid. And then write some tweets about it, or whatever channel it is that write something about it, share it with somebody, share it with a friend or a spouse or whoever, even though they may not care about it at all. Just find one thing that you don't know about and try to have the little aha moment about that one thing. Yeah, it may not be an aha moment about the whole picture, the whole ecosystem or anything like that, but just pick one thing. Hey, I want to learn something better about monitoring my application. Okay, so cool. Maybe that's a little dive into Prometheus, and Prometheus is a huge space as well too. So maybe I just do a little bit to understand how it works or what it's doing. So kind of just do your own little gap analysis and just pick one thing and kind of start there.
Yeah, I can connect to what Michael just said. So just pick one thing. I love that. So let's say what you should not do. You should not go on the tutorial hell. So just watching tutorials for all day long for 1 week, because then you will be overwhelmed of a lot of information. People are explaining with different styles, of course, but this is a good thing. But if you don't get, it's like if you watch like a lot of recipes, like how can you cook something? If you just watch that, you never actually cook that fish. It becomes hard because you get a lot of information without the practical approach. So now for cooking, it's easy. Maybe for software, it's not that easy. So, okay, so let's watch another tutorial. You don't need another tutorial. You need to make an experiment, create a repository, or start with some basics and try to understand that and share it. If you share that will be amazing. So yes, get a very good tutorial. It's enough to get started. You don't need 10. And saying also this as a content creator, but you don't need a lot of tutorials. You just need to wrap your mind around about the basic concepts and practice, and you'll be unstoppable.
Unstoppable. Well, I'm going to start by, let's see if I can do this with the backwards camera. I'm going to start by saying, what he said. both of the he's said. Yeah, because I'm backwards. That was confusing. I am a huge fan of learning bit by bit. And there's so much, when there's a big topic, and, I talk about this with Docker, but also with domain-driven design, especially, which is another area that I spend a lot of time in. That's more about architecture. But there's so many things where you can just learn one thing and benefit from that one thing rather than trying to, become an expert in end-to-end the whole topic, because that's just not going to happen. And picking that one thing, and I am a fan of picking something that intrigues you, as because you're going to, I think, versus don't do this with the thing you have to learn for work. Like you need to get this done because there's going to be a lot of stress behind that. But if you pick something that you're just intrigued by, then the experience of learning it is going to be more, because you chose it, it's going to be a better learning experience. And the more of those learning experiences you have, the more you can apply them to learning things that you'd rather not have to learn yet, but you gotta do it. So just adding on to what they both said.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Francesco, and thank you, Michael. This was a great panel. To the audience, please don't miss the other talks. We have a lot of open source projects and their creators here in the conference. So if you want to see some bioinformatics, some security, some AI, this is your chance to go and check out those projects and ask questions. They all began somewhere, like all of us. Also, make sure to check out our awesome Compose talk. With one command, you can run a Minecraft or whatever technology you are using. We have React, Python, Java, Vue.js, all kinds of containers ready for you to use, and already made as templates for you to change and experiment. So please don't miss those talks, especially if you're a beginner. And well, welcome, and until next time.
Wonderful. Thanks. Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.